Welcome to this webinar on the Farm Business Improvement Scheme Capital Tier 2 Tranche 2. Business plan narrative is a key component of the scheme and will assist you in carefully considering your project and planning, financial, operational and environmental aspects of your project. There will be two templates, one for equipment only and another the full template which will involve construction and equipment for your project. The narrative forms a key component for scoring projects by DAERA, and there will be a minimum pass mark on this document alone. It is important that the figures include sufficient, accurate and up-to-date information that aligns with your farm business planner at the event which is going to be covered on Tuesday the 20th and financing arrangements. There will be significant limitation in this tranche for addressing queries raised with the overall application. We'll just move on to a bit of background behind the farm business. In section 1, question 1, please provide in here full details of the farm business making the application. It is important that the 6-digit category 1 farm business number is included correctly. Please ensure it is the name and address recorded against this business. This will be used to ensure that all parts of your application are associated together. In this section, you must also provide your expression of interest reference number. In the case of the example here, the code you put in would be 812A-E. You will receive this number at the time you completed the expressions of interest. If in doubt, contact the Tier 2 inbox. In question 2, please provide details of the size of your business. For example, land owned and land taken in Conacre. Also include the current enterprise mix on your farm and the scale of each enterprise. Outline the labour that is currently available on the farm and if there is a succession plan in place for your farm. On this example, which you can read through at your own pace, will sort of let you know the details of the farm itself and succession opportunity right down to the level of detail required. This is limited to 250 words to keep this succinct. This allows the assessor to start to build up a picture before he gets into the main body of the assessment. Question 3. Use this question to tell us more about the barriers the business is facing in meeting its main objectives. For example, if buildings are inadequate, give more detail on their age and condition and why they are no longer fit for purpose for modern agriculture. Again, this example here, this is about consolidating the farm business with the current cow numbers and about improving efficiency, which we'll cover later on. Question 4. Answering this question, this is about performance indicators applicable to whatever enterprise it's set out, and this is about the farm metrics which are used, which will cover things like physical and financial metrics. So in this case, farm stocking rate, cow equivalents per hectare are important. Stocking rate only applies to those farms that have grazing livestock as part of their farm business. Average stock numbers for the full calendar year are used. The calculation area for forage crops for the full calendar year. However, the stocking rate calculation should, as far as possible, match with the same 12 months on which the gross margins were calculated. In terms of overheads, include paid labour, Conacre paid, interest and farm borrowings, including machine finance arrangements. If you have pigs, poultry or horticulture enterprise, per hectare figure may not be appropriate. In these cases, total overheads figures should be given. Overheads can be broken down into other categories such as machinery, depreciation, running costs, fuel costs, contractor charges, building depreciation, property repairs, electricity, water and rates, business administration costs, miscellaneous costs, paid labour, Conacre, finance and total overheads. For layers, examples of financial metrics be gross margin, cost per 1,000 birds, egg price, pence per dozen eggs, physical metrics such as concentrates per bird, the yield, egg grading, for example. In cereals, this could be gross margin, grain price, straw price, and physical metrics of grain yield, straw yield and fertiliser. In terms of the project itself, this is sort of describing succinctly in 5b, summarising the nature and the purpose of the project, a description of how it will transform your business, particularly in terms of scale of operation or efficiency of production. In 5c, from those options provided, select the option that best describes your project. In 5d, also list there what other options did you consider other than the proposed project and why do you discount them. In this particular example, there is no other options. The building's too old to repair, else the building would not fit a new parlour the same size and cows would be standing outside. It would not be economically viable to reduce cow numbers for the size of the existing parlour. Moving on to the project objectives. List the main objectives for the project. It is important these are SMART objectives. SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. In other words, when you expect to complete these things and how you operate them. This will allow you to measure and evaluate the success of your project. For example, to increase kilograms of beef produced per hectare per year by 20% by the end of 2022, it is recommended that you have several objectives to cover both physical and financial performance of the farm business. However, financial measures are sometimes more difficult to define due to volatility in output prices, for example. Question 7, a key element of the scheme in this section, provide details of the planning permissions and or other approvals that are in place at the time of your application. Please note the planning permission or certificate of lawfulness must be in place for all construction projects at the time of application to FPS Tier 2. In this section also provide details of other approvals, PPC, licence or consent to discharge. Where the project involves installation of equipment in existing buildings, an engineer's certificate will be required. Please refer to the explanatory booklet for information. You'll note also in this form there's an area where you put your planning reference number. Please make sure you get that correct and complete. Leading into dimensions of the building, this is really just to get an idea, moving more into the detail of what we're going to provide. This is different from the previous tranche where we're asking for more breakdown in buildings and equipment. They provide alongside costs to determine reasonableness of costs and value for money, for example on a square meterage basis. It's important that dimensions recorded here match those on your quotations and any planning documents. In this section, please provide details on the external dimensions of the buildings in meters, so you can that you intend to construct as part of your project. If you're seeking funding for more than one building, then the external dimensions to one decimal place for each building is required, and you'll see how we can scroll across for that. You'll notice as you complete these dimensions that the columns that are highlighted in grey will work out the values automatically, so there's no need to calculate them manually. If funding is sought for concrete aprons, these dimensions also need to be recorded in the boxes there as well. Funding will be limited to a maximum length of 6 metres front and back of the building and overall total width for those aprons. If you intend to construct an apron larger than 6 metres, then record the total size, and this will match the quotation. The funding for the apron will be restricted to the 6 metre portion of that. This is an important section. It's quite detailed, but this refers to estimated project costs supported by quotations. Construction is separate in the main elements of the overall structure. Applicants must provide 2 quotes for each item of proposed expenditure for which grant is being sought. The lowest quotation should be used when recording the estimated project process, and you put a quotation number in to say which one that relates to. The quotations must be recent, not more than 6 months old, be on supplier's headed paper, be dated, and include the supplier details. After the scheme opens, the Annex B of the explanatory booklet will detail this extensively. In the example here, you can see where we've got the first building. I've included site groundworks, and structural frame costs included separately, and it's just for one building. Any other buildings, which in this case we call building 2, you would put the figures in here. This is just for one building, which is the new building for a milking parlour. The business plan narrative allows you to record the details about the construction for up to 4 buildings in total. Additional buildings are accessed by scrolling right as just shown. It's important that you record details of each building cost in line with the template as set out in this narrative. This to ensure quotations supplied are comparative and comparable. All costs associated with the buildings should be stated, an indication of whether funding is being sought. This is in this box here. In this case, you can see the groundworks. They're not claiming grant and not possibly the applicant doing this themselves. An applicant can choose to either select one contractor for the complete works of a new building or use selected contractors for specific parts of the construction. For example, one contractor for the structural frame, including roof, and another for all the concrete works, etc. Where one contractor is selected to complete all the works, then still 2 quotations for the complete job will be required. These quotations should list the cost of the different elements as laid out in the narrative, separating the cost out for groundwork, structural frame, concrete works, etc. In terms of groundworks, this can include demolition and removal of older buildings, any excavation work and stoning of the site. Note, any cost for groundworks associated with storage is not recorded here, but it's section 9b. We are just looking for one cost here, and if you can look at the left hand side, you'll see the heading claim for grant, yes or no. We will need all costs, even if you don't intend to claim grant on it, as the overall cost of the project must match the proposed cost in any letter from the bank or lending institution and the total cost stated in the business plan. In this example, as shown, the applicant has chosen not to claim grant. There could be a number of reasons, as mentioned before. Structural frame costs. As highlighted, this cost may be included within the overall quotation from a single company, or only if this work is being carried out by an individual company, then one cost is required. There's a tick box on the right hand side to highlight what is included within this cost. The box at the bottom titled Other allows for any additional work that is included in this cost and should indicate if this cost includes the erection of the steel itself. In this example here, this does include that and the cost of extra steel for the loft area over the area of the bulk tank. Concrete works. This cost basically covers all the works associated with the rest of the structure. If you look at the tick box section, you will notice that beside the floor, there's a reminder not to include slats. If there is a below ground tank within a house, then the cost of the slats that cover the tank will be considered within the cost of the tank itself. If the walls are precast concrete panels, then these costs can't be included here. Again, if there are any extra costs not included within these tick boxes, these should be recorded in other areas. Also, just a side note, the concrete apron costs should not be included here, but in the box below. The total cost for the concrete apron should be recorded here. This is to do with the dimensions of the concrete apron, where 16 metres in this case by width of building 16.7. This total cost can therefore be used to determine the cost of the area that is eligible. This does not need to be a separate quotation. See, both costs came from quotation 7. It just needs broken out into total concrete costs. The next two sections cover service costs, electrical works and plumbing. You'll notice in this example the applicant is not claiming grant on the plumbing aspect. This is here. There may be other elements of the proposed project that have not been included, and the example shows separate costs for steelwork, for the crush, gates and pens. Other additional works would include the construction of new laneways. Slurry storage funding. It's important to highlight that the farm must be compliant with the current NAP regulation for the 22-26 week storage, and that funding is not available to provide additional storage capacity to meet this requirement. Evidence of this is required using the slurry calculator, which we'll come back to. Remember, all slurry storage systems must be notified to Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and hence it's essential that your engineer is involved in all aspects of the project. The dimension you must record are internal dimensions. The area and total volume will be calculated for you in the grey boxes. The volume calculated here is not the total volume, which is used to compare costs, and not the storage volume, as freeboard has not been accounted for. If there's going to be a building erected over this tank, now or in the future, there should be outside mixing points, and hence dimensions should represent this. All costs associated with the construction should be stated and whether grant is being sought. The business plan narrative allows you to record the details about the construction of up to 2 storage systems, which can be accessed by scrolling right. And that will be called tank 2 in the second case there. All the different options to cover the below ground storage are eligible, and these will need to be supplied with a structural loading certificate at claim stages. All above ground storage tanks need to be covered. Note, where the proposal for a below ground tank, you will need to provide justification for this method of storage against the covered above ground. Moving down into equipment costs. In this section, all equipment required for a proposed project should be recorded and whether grant is being sought. If grant is being sought, 2 quotations are required as usual. Where one company is quoting for a number of items or equipment, these should be listed within the quotation and a separate cost stated. If there are multiples of items within the quotations, these must be quantified. In this case, an example is just one of each. Also, in addition, the costs that would be incurred for engineers, project managers, construction design management, health and safety, post-application are eligible. 2 quotations for the various services are required. The totals of the various sections are summarised, and the overall project total is given. Again, this is a total there is a total of all costs, including ones where no was selected. The box for the estimated grant represents 40% of the total of all the boxes where yes was selected. And this will be worked out for you depending on whether you select yes or no. You see there at the end there's a total of each one of the elements there: building costs, tank costs, equipment, technical, and the overall estimated costs, and then the estimated grant cost as well. So it's important to note you cannot seek more than 250,000 grant overall, but that covers everything you've sought grant for under the programme. In terms of financing the project, in this section you must provide details on the financing of your project. You must record how you propose to co-finance the project either by a loan or your own resources. All applicants must provide an indication of support letter completed by their bank or lending institution. This is required as part of the overall application. Section 10, Livestock and Nutrient Management. This section would apply to anyone with livestock within their farm business. In this example, if you're applying for only the milking part of this section would need to be completed. It's important that your nutrient management plan meets and where possible goes further than the statutory Nutrient Action Management Plan regulations of 2019, which includes livestock manure nitrogen loading, manure storage and fertilisation plan requirements currently and following your project. Further information is available on the website. For all projects, evidence of livestock manure nitrogen loading and manure storage calculations must be uploaded to the EU grants website as part of your application. Interactive calculators must be used for calculating this in terms of weekly storage, dirty water, manure production and current storage capacity for a farm, and checks that it has the 22 or 26 weeks capacity. Calculators are available on the website. It is important that livestock numbers in the baseline and the projections are accurate and consistent across all documents submitted. DARE will check departmental and Northern Ireland Environment Agency records to verify your baseline livestock manure nitrogen loading, manure storage calculations, records of derogation approval and exporting of manures where appropriate. A fertilisation plan is required if chemical phosphate fertiliser to grassland, high phosphate manures or digestate is applied to any land. Derogated farms must prepare and maintain a more comprehensive fertilisation plan. Where a fertilisation plan is required, you may be asked to provide a copy prior to approval or payment. If applicable, provide more detailed information on how you will manage slurry produced on your farm. This should include details of how this slurry will be stored, including the design features planned to minimise the release of greenhouse gases and ammonia, and how it's actually spread on the land. A project which considers the production of slurry, its removal into suitable storage and the spreading of that slurry by alternative spreading means will likely attract more points in the selection criteria on the environmental theme. The questions within section 10 of the form focus on the changes to certain elements of your farm practice that may contribute to an environmental improvement. These include the average numbers of days per year the animals will be at grass before and after the project, and as you can see in this proposal, it's included new laneways, so days at grass are increasing with an exclamation given in the box below. Section 10F and G requires an estimate of the number of cattle of each type and the average days per year housed before and after the project. If your project could result in an increase in an average number of days that animals are housed, please indicate the reasons for this in the box provided below. Section 10H relates to the recording of increasing cattle, pigs or poultry numbers and how many additional numbers of animals will be in your farm after the project. Section I should be completed where livestock numbers are increasing, indicating the methods you're proposing to use to meet the nitrate regulations. And we can also say that if your proposal to export manure, that you provide a letter as part of one of your uploads. Moving on to section 11, to do with the farm business improvement capital scheme themes. The focus of Tier 2 is on larger scale whole farm investments to encourage a significant change in agriculture and horticulture sectors through transformational investment in future-proofed, fit-for-purpose, modern infrastructure and equipment. In this section, explain how your proposed expenditure would enable the farm business to meet these objectives. There are currently 6 themes that are there in terms of contribution to growth, which have 4 parts in there in terms of gross value added, in terms of how much the farm business GVA is expected to increase post-project. Resilience, how resilient the farm business will be to market pressures post-project. Investment stretch, in terms of how resilient your farm will be to market pressures post-project. And how the amount of investment proposed compares to the business turnover. Growth, what is the potential for growth and output and overall turnover post-project. Another theme is in terms of improved production resource efficiency. This is how much potential to improve production resource efficiency there would be post-project. So you'll be asked to describe how your project will improve the environmental performance of your farm business in terms of air emissions, water quality, soil health, biodiversity and carbon. Describe how your project will work towards reducing the carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, and how the potential for investment to reduce carbon, greenhouse gas emissions and capture carbon are relevant, which may be relevant to the sector. Also describe in this next section to do with how much the investment improve animal and plant health and or animal welfare. In terms of health and safety, there will likely be a stronger focus on this in this tranche to incentivise projects with additional health and safety features to drive on farm safety improvements. So be required detailed actions to be taken to maintain and or improve health and safety standards on the farm after completion of the project through that investment and associated practices. For construction projects, this will include planning, site constructions and a safe operation through to completion. Also outline what the contractor and any subcontractors will do to maintain health and safety on the construction site. Applicants should note that to making it safer, self-assessment is a scheme requirement which helps identify where health and safety improvements should be considered, for example animal handling facilities, automation and repetitive labour-intensive tasks. The Making It Safer is an online facility which provides applicants to answer questions relating to key areas of risk in terms of slurry, animals, falls and equipment. It provides an opportunity to review the way you work and take steps to safer practices. A Farm Safety Action Plan certificate will be issued after completion. This certificate must be uploaded as part of the application process. It is essential that the name of the applicant on the DARE Category 1 Farm Business ID is entered into the Making It Safer certificate or it will not be accepted and the application deemed ineligible. At the end of the assessment, you'll also be asked to indicate locations of your main farmyard and any out farms as part of the investment or where storage of manure and slurry is held. Applicants who can meet this eligibility criteria by completing the online assessment to the farmsafenet.org Safer website and uploading their certificate to the EU grant system. Moving on to skills, this question, under question 12, relates to applicants. It gives them an opportunity to explain the skills and expertise that will be available to complete the project and manage the farm business going forward. The business investment often requires a new set of skills, both to cope with the managing the transition phase and perhaps also operating new technology that has been purchased. It is important that applicants demonstrate they have access to the necessary skills and expertise to deliver the business plan. Applicants should consider this question as fully as possible, as the onus is on the applicant to make the best case possible for the proposed project. The skills and expertise can be internal or external to the business, include relevant experience, qualifications, etc. in your application. For example, if you have a farm business related qualification. This is one method of providing competence. Other family members may also be involved in ensuring the project is successful. If they have relevant qualifications, please provide these too. If you have managed other similar projects in the past, that would be useful as well. Moving down to section 13 is about risks. These are risks on the successful completion of your project. For example, what happens if there's increased input costs, whether it's disease outbreak or extreme weather situations, succession issues. Importantly, you should give a consideration to and provide details how you plan to minimise the impact of those risks which you've identified. This will include options to minimise the impact of, say, a volatile cash flow situation or delays in purchasing equipment. Question 14, you're asked to describe what existing and planned information management facilities you'll be using, which includes the information technology to help manage the business and to monitor and evaluate the success of the project. Question 15, the evidence of supply chain integration. It's important that applicants demonstrate there is a market for their produce. Explain the current and planned markets for the main commodities produced on farm, including, for example, details of the main customers, current and planned, estimate the amount of produce produced and what price guarantees may exist, etc. Please provide supporting evidence if applicable, for example, letters of interest, written contracts, etc. A project will be more secure in the long term if a contract exists for the projects. Applicants applying should do so through the EU grant system. Question 16 relating to production has two parts. Select all the options that summarises how the level of production will change on the farm as a result of the project. For example, production increased, in this case it's been ticked. Production unchanged but cost reduced. Production unchanged but quality improved. Production decreased but efficiency improved. Production decreased but labour saved, or other, and provide in the box provided, such as details on expected changes to production level as a result of the project. If the production capacity is increasing, detail how long it will take to reach full capacity. This may not always be immediately after the completion of the project. If there is an expected delay, explain the reasons for the delay. For example, production cycle, increase in stock numbers coming from within the farm, or production increased in line with market opportunities. In terms of financials and assumptions, this question can only be answered when you've completed your farm business plan or cash flows. There's a separate webinar to look at the details within that. It's important to note there is now an additional business plan narrative assumptions tab within this business plan narrative that you'll be required to complete, detailing all the essential assumptions that you have used when compiling the business plan narrative and the farm business planner. These assumptions should explain the substantiate the values that you've recorded for your project baseline and the projected position after your FBS project. The assumptions are essential to the assessment of your application and should be as accurate as possible. I'm just going to flick on to the assumptions tab. First section is general assumptions, and the examples can include details of land owned, rented, machinery, policy, etc. So in this case we have the area of land stipulated in terms of volumes, numbers and rates. Then we have general assumptions associated with the enterprise. Examples include sale prices, output weights, calving pattern, meal costs covered by the egg packer, fertilizer cost per tonne, and so different rates within there. And if silage is made with own machinery, contract rearing costs, meal, medicines covered by pig heifer supply, etc. Where there's more than one enterprise, record the assumptions for each. In terms of other income assumptions, examples include details of land or buildings let out, basic payment scheme, loan amounts, personal money introduced to the business, any other off-farm income such as way leave, contract work carried out, renewable energy payments income, sales of machinery, equipment, etc. Section 4 covers overhead and fixed cost assumptions. Examples could include any details that help explain the figures in the overhead section of the farm business planner. Work carried out by contractor, such as Conacre, wage, labour, rates, drawings, and so on, can be included on this. In terms of financial assumptions, these include any details to help explain the figures in the finance section of the farm business planner, existing loans, HP agreements, interest rates, and so on. New loans for project, bridging loans, long-term loans, etc. And you can see the detail provided in this example. Section 6 covers stock valuation assumptions and provide an explanation of any changes to stock numbers or valuations, etc. So that concludes the assumptions section, so that will need completed alongside the details on your narrative. In the projection where you've included capital expenditure and grant aid, you should try various options in terms of output price to see where your project will break even in terms of cash flow over the 5-year period. In other words, at what output price does the opening cash flow at the beginning of your projection stay the same as the cash flow at the end of your projection? This will show you the price you need for your project at a minimum for your project to allow steady cash flow to be maintained. Business plan projections should be based on recent performance of your farm. The base 5-year projection in particular should reflect the cash flow you expect from your farm business and any transformational farm investment. In order to demonstrate that your farm business cash flow is based on sound information, you'll be asked to provide a copy of one of the following documents: CAFRE, benchmarking results, accountant's report, or full set of management accounts. In forward projecting cash flow, the prices used in projections have a significant influence on the outcome of the projection. At this question, you should detail how the input and output prices have been used in your farm business planner cash flow, and consider any key ones used and why you've used them. If you have increased figures for prices and output in your post-spend projection, you should detail these increases and what your assumptions are. It is important that where figure work is presented in your application, that these correspond throughout. For example, figures presented in the business plan cash flows should align with those in the financial sections. Please note that the applicants previously in receipt of award under Tier 1, Tier 2 may seek further grant, but must not exceed the $250,000 limit grant across the entire programme. Question 20 relates to the need for grant. Public funds should only be directed to those projects required to proceed. Explain why funding is needed for the project and outline the implications for the business and the project if grant is not received. For example, the project would not proceed at all, the project would proceed but over a longer time frame or smaller scale, would miss opportunities due to the slower growth, for example. Explain what other sources of funding other than the grant have been considered and ruled out, and provide evidence where available. That just leaves the section in terms of declaration, where you would have your signed declaration dated on there, and also allocate what assistance you had within the project in completing this form. Thank you. Just in terms of this example of taking through, this will be hosted on the website, and you can go through both this tab and the assumptions tab. This is for the dairy example, construction and equipment. There's also an hour example for equipment only, which will have different assumptions obviously and different content.